Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the news from the global economy. In today's show, Hamas faces payment issues in Gaza, and Scottish fishermen are anxious about the prospect of independence. First, the headlines. Asian stocks sank on Monday after the weakest growth in Chinese industrial output since 2008 added to evidence the world's second biggest economy is losing momentum. Markets closely tied to China were in the firing line, with Hong Kong down 0.97%, while the FTSE Asia Pacific Index dropped 0.57%. Seoul's Kospi lost 0.3%, and Sydney's S&P ASX 200 shed 1.04%. Industrial activity increased 6.9% in August from the same month a year ago, slowing from July's 9% rise. A downturn in real estate and sluggish corporate investment in China will likely weigh on China's GDP in 2014, which Beijing hopes will reach 7.5%. Ukraine and the EU agreed to put off implementing a landmark trade deal after Moscow threatened trade restrictions that would further cripple Ukraine's economy. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko faces rising criticism following the delay and increased pressure ahead of parliamentary elections next month. A senior diplomat resigned in protest, and pro-European politicians blasted the decision as caving to Russia. Ukraine's central bank chief said the economy could shrink by 10% this year, and additional trade restrictions by Moscow would further squeeze the economy. But according to a former senior Ukrainian diplomat, delaying the EU agreement is akin to formally acknowledging Russia's veto right over the deal. Alibaba Group kicked off its Asia Roadshow in Hong Kong in what many expect will be a new record for the world's biggest IPO in the United States. After a week of investors' meetings that kicked off in New York last Monday, Alibaba already has sufficient demand to complete the deal in the current price range of $60 to $66 per share. Executive Chairman and founder Jack Ma told a crowd of journalists that Alibaba plans to expand into the US and Europe markets aggressively after its IPO. Transactions handled by Alibaba subsidiaries Taobao and Tmall last year amounted to $248 billion, larger than the figures for Amazon and eBay combined.
After our IPO in the United States today, we will vigorously expand in Europe and the United States. Meanwhile, we will not give up on Asia. After all, we are not a company from China. We are an internet company that happens to be in China.
French flag carrier Air France scrapped half its flights on Monday as pilots striked in protest at the company's plan to develop its low-cost subsidiary. The main pilots' union at Air France has called for a week-long strike, which would be the longest at the company since 1998. Air France boss Frédéric Gaguet put the daily losses from the strike at $13 to $19 million. In Germany, Lufthansa pilots announced a strike on Tuesday, the fourth in 3 weeks, to increase pressure on the airline over an early retirement scheme. Lufthansa shares fell 1.9% on the blue-chip DAX index in late morning trade.
7,000 personnes, ce sont tous les personnels Air France.
7,000 people, that is all Air France's sales personnel in call centers, on layovers. We are bringing in reinforcements to help greet our customers. These 7,000 are from all over. Hostesses and stewards will be there to help find solutions for our customers.
Saudi Arabia is changing its approach to labor reforms by making more money available for private sector salaries and training. Authorities first launched labor reforms in 2011 following the Arab Spring uprisings to avoid political unrest by reducing unemployment and moving workers into the private sector. But as the reforms slowed the economy and slashed profits at some firms, the government is now spending billions on subsidizing Saudi workers' salaries and sharing the cost of company training programs. Despite a marked increase in the employment of Saudi workers in the private sector, however, a drop in oil prices would make the reform unsustainable.
The agreement between us and Harvard University is that there is an annual training for a number of Saudi researchers on sophisticated research methods applied in that university and in other universities and research centers.
Employees in Gaza waited in long lines last week to receive salaries Hamas failed to pay them for months. Hamas has demanded the new government that unites it with arch-rival Fatah, which rules the West Bank, take responsibility for paying its 45,000 employees, some 27,000 of which are civil servants. Here's the report by Daniel Roth.
After 50 days of Operation Protective Edge, Palestinians in Gaza are taking stock of the massive destruction beyond the more than 2,000 dead. According to Reuters, the Palestinian Authority said that reconstruction could cost nearly $8 billion, which is 2.5 times Gaza's GDP. With the blockade of Gaza still firmly in place, the economy is still lurching, and rebuilding will be a major undertaking if it is to succeed at all. Case in point, before the rise in violence, approximately 30 tons of cement entered Gaza on a weekly basis, while now up to 10,000 tons will be needed on a daily basis for the next half year.
For rebuilding the Gaza Strip and to reconstruct what was destroyed during the last war, we should have two major things. The first one is to open all the commercial crossings with Gaza and to bring all the construction materials that is needed, like cement, steel, and stones without limitation on a daily basis around the year.
Everything from sewage to housing to holy places needs immediate attention. The power plant is running at just 6% of its total ability and is needed to power desalination and sewage treatment processes. Internal divides within the Palestinian people are also present. Despite reconciliation developments between Fatah and Hamas in the months before the war, tensions are high primarily due to struggles over the payment of salaries for Hamas workers.
I came here to receive my salary. I have not received my salary for 5 months. This is a problem we are suffering from in the Gaza Strip.
Hamas is demanding that 45,000 employees that have not been paid get their salaries, according to AFP. With 40% unemployment in the Gaza Strip, this dispute could boil over.
We hope and demand that the salaries of all employees be paid. We did not stop our work even during the days of the war.
Between physical rebuilding, efforts for reconciliation within Palestinian factions, and mourning the dead, the end of this hard summer does not mean the end of hardships for the Palestinians of Gaza.
European Union nations in March agreed on a sweeping policy to fight tax evasion as banks accepted new rules aimed at making banking culture more transparent. As Israel recently also committed itself to the new single global standard for automatic exchange of tax information, we're joined by Guy Reshtik, CPA and tax partner in Baker Tilly, Israel, for a discussion on measures taken to resolve these issues of tax evasion. Mr. Reshtik, thank you very much for joining us. So first of all, just to give us, our viewers and myself, a better understanding here of what we're talking about, there's this offshore voluntary disclosure program that has been accepted in Israel. What is it?
Well, first of all, nice to be here. We have to learn about the Israeli tax structure. Israel is taxing its residents on a worldwide basis, which means that as long as you're an Israeli resident, you have to pay taxes on your worldwide income. Okay. Now, apparently, there are a lot of Israelis that haven't declared all of their income. So, in general, the Israeli tax authorities have initiated a new voluntary disclosure program, which supports and encourages the Israeli residents to come clean and to report on their worldwide income that wasn't declared until now. Now, the two new things with this new procedure, which replaces the old procedure that started in 2005, one of them is that you can come and report on your income anonymously. So you can start negotiating with the Israeli tax authorities, and at the end, if you agree about your tax burden, you can then disclose your name and receive an immunity from being prosecuted in criminal action. Now, the second new thing that wasn't in the old procedure is that you can choose like a short track. Which means that as long as you have income up to 500,000 new Israeli shekels, or a capital which is not more than 2 million shekels, you can come in a fast track, which fastens things with the authorities.
It speeds up things. Okay, so I mean, to me it sounds a little bit like, this might be sending a message to some people at least that says, hey, tax evasion pays off. Look, these people did it, and now they're coming off scot-free. Is that true?
Well, it's always the questions that we receive as tax advisors. First of all, you have to understand that in Israel, as like in other states, not reporting on your income is a criminal offense.
Sure.
So you can be prosecuted and go even to jail, up to 7 years in jail. So not reporting on your income can end in criminal prosecution.
Sure.
Now, beside that, no one can guarantee that if you will not pay your taxes and you will come to the authorities with the new OVDP, that you will receive any concession, any reduction of your tax burden. Okay, so there are fines that you are able to,
you're liable to pay.
Sure. There are interest. So, yeah.
Okay, now looking from the other perspective, I mean, how much tax does the government actually hope to retrieve through this program?
Well, it's
hard to know.
It's hard to know. You know, the commissioner of the Israeli tax authorities have said before recently that the taxes are the black capital, we call it in Hebrew, hon shachor, is about 50 billion shekels.
Wow.
Which is quite substantial to our budget.
We're going to have to close. So just in final comment, how does this compare to the world, to the rest of the world? Tax evasion is not an Israeli thing, obviously. How does this compare?
Well, I think it's a global it's a global act. You could see that in the U.S. they had voluntary disclosures programs all over the years, and even now you can see in Italy, in France, in the U.S. they have a new voluntary disclosure program. So compared to the world, we are like them. But it's not a good thing that we have to...
that we have to actually enforce these kinds of laws.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Guy Reshtek from Baker Tilly, CPA and tax partner. Scotland's fishermen face some choppy waters ahead if the country votes for independence from the United Kingdom in a referendum on September 18th. Some would welcome the move, but others fear that separation would give them a much smaller voice in the European Union, where the all-important fish quotas are negotiated.
DJ has been fishing for prawn, crab and lobster off Scotland's northwestern coast ever since he left school 17 years ago. It's a life he loves, even though rising costs, particularly fuel, have hit profits badly. Now there's new uncertainty. 90% of DJ's catch is exported to Spain and France, where Scottish shellfish is highly prized. It's unclear what currency Scotland would use and how it would measure up against other currencies if Scots vote to become independent in a referendum on the 18th of September.
I think long term it would probably be better, but there's still a few unanswered questions to do with currency and how things will work. But
concerns over the economic outlook of an independent Scotland also loom large over the Peterhead fish market in the northeast. This is Europe's biggest wholesale market for freshly landed white fish, such as haddock, cod and whiting. Approximately 1 million boxes of fish are sold here annually and dispatched around Europe. A lot is sold domestically to England.
the difference between putting fish to England and putting fish to France, there's a big difference in paperwork we have to do regarding filling out forms for France and making sure everything's correct. There's nothing like that at the moment for England. If that becomes a reality, there'll be a huge amount more paperwork and so on. So it's a big upheaval.
The pro-independence camp says an Edinburgh government would better represent the interests of the fishing industry, which is much bigger in Scotland than the rest of the United Kingdom. With fishing representing less than 1% of Britain's GDP, it claims London has bargained away its fishing rights and quotas in Europe. It's a message that resonates with fishermen. Strict EU quotas to protect fish stocks has caused Peterhead's fishing fleet to contract 75% in the past 2 decades, from about 120 boats to just 30. Peter Bruce is one of the few who remain.
I mean, our industry has been contracting something fearsome over the last 20 years. So, I mean, I would see this as a new start, and it's not going to be easy. I totally realise that. But I think there are opportunities for us to move ahead in the industry.
But in the short term, independence could mean more pain for Scotland's fishermen. They currently catch 20 to 30% more than their EU quota by buying or leasing quotas from English or Welsh boats, which is only allowed because it's within the overall UK quota.
The real crux that people need to understand about the potential effects of separation are what it will do to access to the raw material, to quota. How do we square the circle of we use a lot more than we own, and we are able to do that because we're able to trade in a fluid system? What happens when that system stops?
No one knows how long it would take an independent Scotland to join the EU in its own right, nor what would happen to its fishing quotas in the meantime. If the country does vote to go it alone, its fishing fleet will be sailing into uncharted waters.
And that's a wrap for us at The Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports at I24 News. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares. Follow me on Twitter at Chong Alfares. Send us your comments via the feedback link at the bottom of our page at i24news.tv. And stay tuned for more on the economy tomorrow.